A few months ago, I noticed something strange in my library. My most played tracks were all in the same 4 keys. What was going on? For years, key or harmonic mixing has been my main way of choosing tracks in my sets. I thought it was making my mixes sound smoother, but I'd actually trapped myself in a never-ending cycle of predictability. And worse, I didn't even notice. In this video, I'm going to go through the 5 huge problems key mixing can cause, and what I did about them. And where better to do that than in the home of Mozart and Conchita Wurst. First, let's do a quick recap on what key mixing is and why it first appears so useful. Keeping it simple, a musical key is a series of notes that kind of defines the identity of the piece of music. There's a handy tool in musical theory called the circle of fifths. If the keys are next to each other on the circle, they should, in theory, sound pretty good together. One example is C major and G major. The outer circle is the major, happier sounding keys, and the inner circle are the relative minor keys. The Camelot wheel is basically a rebranded circle of fifths. The musical key names are replaced by numbers. The idea is it's more accessible to those without a formal background in music. So just by being able to count, you know which track should work well together. All sounds pretty useful so far, and I blindly followed its teachings for over a decade. But this rotund diagram has a dark side. In Rekordbox, this is called the traffic light. Green means a track will sound awesome when you mix it in with the currently playing track, and anything else will sound bad. Isn't modern technology marvelous? Well, it turns out there's 5 big reasons it isn't quite that simple. Many tracks have percussive portions, usually intros or outros, where there's nothing harmonically going on. Essentially, these parts of the track don't actually have a key. That means you can mix almost anything over the top of them without having to worry about key clashes. DJ software only assigns a key based on the melodic parts of the track. So tracks with keyless intros were never being suggested because the melodic part of the track wasn't in a compatible key. That meant I was ignoring hundreds or maybe thousands of easily mixable tracks. Because music is fun, many tracks change key midway. So even if the DJ software says a track is in an incompatible key, there could still be small sections which are in a compatible key. This caused me 2 issues. Firstly, it made me think too rigidly in terms of transitions, only considering them where 2 melodic sections might be playing at the same time. And secondly, it reduced my ability to experiment with key changes within the same track. And in some cases, you could use a single track to change the whole musical direction of a set. You'll find many genres or subgenres have a few keys that lots of the tracks tend to use. That's because those keys tend to sound good with that kind of sound. I play drum and bass, and a lot of the more dance floor stuff is in 4A or F minor. If I happen to play something from that subgenre, I get trapped in a threesome with sub-focus and dimension for the next 45 minutes, and there's only so much man bun and cigarettes a man can take. I started to notice by key mixing I was stuck in a particular corner of my library for way longer than I wanted to. That's because the key leap to get to a different subgenre was a long and winding path through the Camelot wheel, and frankly I was lazy. The set was playing me instead of the other way around. And I'm curious if you've ever felt like the set was playing you instead of you playing the set. Let me know in the comments. I always thought my goal as a DJ was to create harmony, play tracks that sounded good harmonically together. But as I've been learning the piano, I learned a new musical concept. Harmony is like 2 colours that blend together well, like when you mix blue and red to create a nice quality street purple. Dissonance is like 2 colours that clash, like red and green. At first, dissonance sounds like something bad or undesirable. But just like in art, it can create intensity, atmosphere, and surprise. All things useful in a DJ set. Music, just like a satisfying sneeze, is all about tension and release. If you musically pinch the crowd's nose by causing dissonance, the eventual release will be a lot more powerful. It's why drop swaps work so well. Of course, sometimes dissonance will just sound plain bad, and you shouldn't overuse it. But it's definitely something I've started experimenting with more, and I've been surprised at how it can completely change the vibe of my sets. Of all the problems, this next one is probably the biggest. Sometimes DJ software simply gets the key wrong. That means it might suggest tracks from the wrong key, which will just sound rubbish. or not suggest tracks at all which are actually compatible. It's important to remember no key detection algorithm is perfect. I've even heard from some viewers that use a piano to work out the key of a track. That's a bit too much for me, but my point is I was blindly trusting the algorithm instead of using my own ears. And if the channel teaches you only one thing, it's never trust rekordbox. So what am I actually doing about this? My ears were getting lazy, and frankly, I was getting bored of playing the same old tunes again and again. Something needed to change. I've made 2 small changes to my workflow that have finally freed me from this elliptical prison, and so far I'm kinda liking the results. We're trained from a young age to recognise bright colours at a subconscious level, especially ones like green, which in Western cultures mean things like go, good, or sour apple flavour. So my first step was to disable traffic light. By removing that psychological trigger, I've made it easier to explore different parts of my library. To do that in rekordbox, you can just click the master button above the playlist. And I do recommend actually turning this off rather than just disabling it, because otherwise the temptation will always be there. Next, I've stopped using key as my primary decision maker for choosing a track. Now it's just part of the picture along with other things like energy level or vibe. And I have to admit I've been really surprised at how well tracks seemingly not in the same key go together, particularly in genres like drum and bass, which are quite percussive anyway. This, along with learning the piano, has helped me retrain my ear and start to trust my instincts again, instead of what DJ software is telling me. It's important to say at this stage, I'm not completely shitting on key mixing. When it works well, it can sound really good. The trick is, like my new vlogging camera, don't overuse it. And there are plenty of other ways I use rekordbox to help me choose the next best track to play. In this video, along with a giant beard, I show you 3 tiny changes you can make to your workflow to find tracks faster. And that's me from Birmingham, signing off.